Okay, well, we'll start. So thank you everybody for joining us this evening for this exciting development in SulbyRiverside on the Isle of Man. It's going to be a £40 million proposal for a gateway site, and it's led by Nathan Church. His son's going to be speaking on his behalf this evening. We've been working on this site now for just over a year, and it's a site that's been earmarked for development. We're hoping to deliver in the order of about 200 homes, new retail opportunities, workspace, 3 public parks, a riverside gastro pub with function rooms. I think what's important to sort of note with this development is that it's been shut off to the public for a number of years, and this endeavour, this proposition, will open it up to the public with a development that's not just about the quantum of units, but actually it's about quality placemaking. And that's one of the reasons why our company's been involved. So I'm Richard Coots, I'm one of the directors of Backer Architects. And our work, all the clients sort us out specifically for our expertise in these areas and to bring something fresh, energetic, attractive to Ramsey. So what we're going to do, just to give you a little bit of sort of insight into the running order. So I'll make the introductions as I have. I'll introduce you briefly to the clients. We have Jeff McGarity from Bell Cornwall, who will kindly talk briefly about policy. Then I'll go on to talk about design. We have Matt Thompson here from Tetra Tech, who will help us regarding transport and movement. I'll talk on behalf of JBA in terms of ecology. David Ramsbottom will help us with regarding flooding. Fabric will be involved regarding the landscape. And then I'll go on to talk about building heights, energy, sustainability, and we'll conclude with the visuals. If during the evening you do want to ask any questions, then please just post them and Jack will go through all of those, and then he'll ask them on your behalf at the end in a Q&A session, and we'll assign those to the prospective consultants. For those that joined us early, we're a team that have worked together for a long time, and you probably overheard some of the sort of chit chat, but we're a well-oiled team, and we've been working together for nearly over a decade, and hopefully some of that care and attention and that camaraderie will come through in our presentation this evening. And as I say, we're still in the development process, and we'll very much look forward to taking some of your questions at the end of the evening. So I'm just going to hand over now to Mr. Joshua Church.
Good evening, everyone. I just want to say thank you very much for joining us. We have already had some great feedback on our initial public consultation through the online website, some great support, and also some really good feedback as well, which we're reviewing in the sort of coming days and weeks. We have worked very hard to create a cohesive scheme based on master planning here. We're not typical developers trying to build things rapidly and for major profits. This is a scheme that is really of interest to us, which I think you can see as the presentation will unravel this evening. We have a fantastic team, as Richard has said, and they know the scheme inside out, and everyone's put a lot towards this, and we do hope it's appreciated, and we really just look forward to your feedback, and we thank you for taking the time on a Monday evening to come and watch the presentation. So I think we'll just pass on to the professional team to run through the various facets of the scheme so far, and look forward to hearing your questions as the presentation goes. Thank you.
So hello everybody, my name is Jeff McGarity. I'm the planning consultant from Bell Cornwall, working on this scheme, and just I think the first initial couple of slides are to introduce the site. I'm sure most of you through the website and through the other consultations, we are familiar with it. So as you can see from the slides here, we've got the aerial photographs showing the site in its current form. So the site is just, it's located we've got Pildui Road to the east, and to the south, you've got Ramsey Town Centre. To the north, you've got the Sulby River itself, and then to the east, it's to the west. Sorry, is Gardeners Road. To the south, we've also got a disused railway line, which includes the kind of recreation paths for walkers, cyclists, and for horse riders as well. And even further south of that is the Riverside Industrial Estate. Within the site boundary, we do have the Pildui Nature Reserve, and we are working with this professional team to deliver a mixed-use residential-led scheme on this site. So, Jack, if you just go to the next slide. So, the site has been allocated historically through the Ramsey Area Plan, which was published in 1998, as somewhere where they've been seeking development, and they've been seeking improvements through things such as kind of public infrastructure, such as a new road that connects the kind of east of the site to the west. And initially it was allocated for commercial-led development as a kind of view to expand the industrial estate to the south. Now, that was allocated 23 years ago, and through despite that, there's never been any kind of progress on a solely commercial-led scheme. The site plan itself does extend further than what you can see here, which also included some historically allocated residential development, but this was taken from the 1998 plan. So next slide there, Jack. This gives a kind of a wider context of the site, what we are looking for in the most kind of pure form in terms of where we expect the development to be carried out. In terms of other planning policy, we have the 2016 strategic plan, which encompasses the entire island, as well as the West Ramsey Development Framework, which again doubles down on the proposed spine road, as we're going to be calling it, which is something that is part of the cornerstone of this development. Next slide there. As part of to kind of echo what Richard and Joshua have said, we've been working on this, on the initial preparations for this, our future planning application, for well over a year, and we've been working as a team for a very, very long time on this site. We've instructed numerous surveys, as you can see listed there. I won't bore you with all the details about them, but we have been working in a very detailed and thorough fashion to establish what it is that can be safely and appropriately delivered on this site, whilst also delivering something that the people of Ramsey and this part of the Isle of Man need, but also want as well. So we have been very thorough with that, and as part of our ongoing process of consultation and discussion with the Isle of Man government, we've been in pre-application discussions with them for almost over a year. We've also had a number of newspaper announcements and press releases as well, just because for us, bringing the local community along beside us on this development and with us is just as important as the delivery of it as well. So that's why, hence this public consultation as well, just so that we can directly speak to the people that it's going to be that are going to live with this exciting new development. Next slide. So to just be clear, the process, the planning application process by which we are using for this site is something called a hybrid planning application. Now, for those who aren't aware, a hybrid application encompasses different types of planning application under one umbrella. This includes a full planning application and something called an outline planning application. I'm sure most of you are aware, but I'll just I'll make it clear for those who aren't. A full planning application is what it does, what it says on the tin. It's all the details that are going to be that are required to secure planning approval. So we're looking at the details of the design of the homes, the layout and details of the new spine road, and specific topics in a certain area. As you can see under 171, that is where we're going to have the full application, but within that red line, we will set out details of things that will be brought forward in that physical location. So that includes also one of the dedicated play areas, the public open space that has been already discussed. We have decided to do it in this fashion because this secures some of the key public infrastructure which forms part of this project, and hence specifically the spine road, which is something that the government has been very keen on and wants to be delivered in phase 1, as it were. Hence why the red line is shaped in that way. Now, the outline planning application is for the wider site. Now, with outline applications, we'll set out what the parameters of development will be. So as you can see, we've got circa 140 new homes, the employment provision, 2 further public play areas, some retail, as well as the Riverside Public House. We have done it in this way because we want to ensure that we want to ensure that there is an element of flexibility to adapt the scheme if needs be in the future, and also allow for potentially different types of designs to be accommodated for in the future if there is a change in policy or a change in kind of design going forward. So the benefit of the hybrid application is that we kind of have the best of both worlds, in the sense of the area will have a guarantee that there will be development there because we'll start work in the phase 1, but this will then also lead to future applications and future details in the outline application. Next slide. And yeah, that will be me, and I'll pass over to Richard from BACA.
Thank you, Jeff. So we're just going to show you a few slides now to just orientate those who are joining us today with sort of orientating us with throughout the site. So the top right hand image are the proposed for the gateway buildings that lead off Paul Road into the site, so bottom left hand corner. Next slide, Jack, please. Up to the left hand corner of the site there are a mix of semi-detached houses. Next slide, Jack. In the bottom there, we can now see some of the apartments which will overlook the park and then the nature reserve beyond. Next slide. And then along the main spine, which we're sort of calling a boulevard, will be tree lined. And you'll see that they're 2-story in the middle with the corner 3 stories on the corners, which then act as gateways to guide you into the cul-de-sacs, which are sit behind. Next slide. And then finally, the public house. And I saw there was a question raised regarding the public house. So through our sort of needs assessment with local businesses and with other people on the island, we understand that for sort of Sunday afternoon, there isn't a place to go and have a Sunday meal with a family with wonderful panoramic views over the river, but equally as well along the nature trail, there aren't many opportunities to go and use a toilet or just have a break, and that actually means that the walk isn't as optimized as possible. So that's some of the thinking behind the pub, and we respect the views of others. So next slide. So we've put together a series of diagrams which hopefully explain the sort of the holistic proposal behind this design. And this is based on some research that BACA Architects did for the British government in liaison with the Environment Agency and the Homes for Community agencies. And that was called the LIFE project, which looked at providing sustainable development so we don't exacerbate climate change. We make space for water so we don't harm or interfere with the natural flows of the river. We preserve, so this is a natural flood mitigation strategy. So we don't touch any of the mature planting or the nature reserve. And we work within the realms of the site, which is a strategic urban allocated site. And we are aware that there are other developments and other proposals coming through in Ramsey. And our proposal would mean that we don't need to sprawl into the green belt. We're aware of other developments that may well do that. And the benefit of that then means that we have jobs in the heart of Ramsey, and the spine road, as we understand from commissioners and planning and other locals, is that the development to the west is partially complete, but people that live there have to sort of circumvent, go down Gardeners Road, and then back to the east towards Ramsey, which is okay, but it's a long journey. But in the event of something like the TT, that would will be quite problematic. So the spine road is a key piece of infrastructure which links the east to the west, and also then acts as a key sort of fulcrum to the development that follows. So next slide, Jack. So within that, we mentioned that there's been some surveys. So we've had habitat surveys, we've had arboriculturists walk the site and map the trees from good quality down to low quality. And our design layout has avoided all of the category A trees. And what we've done within that process is link those into key play areas, and then also threaded through that a public movement network, which then keys into the tramway. So this is a very permeable development. It's very accessible, and it opens up, as I say, a site which was cut off to the public and makes it accessible. Next slide, please. So this just shows you the play spaces and the swales. And I think we've got a NEEP, a neighbourhood equipped area for play. We've got 2 laps, local equipped areas for plays. And then just other space where kids can go and have ball games. Next slide. So the bulk of the development sits south below the spine road and follows a similar urban grain to sort of the adjacent developments. We've gone slightly higher along the main road to give you a sort of sense of arrival with a lower density and mix of dwellings behind. Next slide. Beyond those, so north of the spine road, we have the blocks of apartments, which we discussed earlier, some employment, and then the public house. And then in the bottom right-hand corner there, you can see some kiosks, and we'll come on to that later. Next slide. And through the public consultation, we have heard and we have listened that we understand that flooding is a concern, and that's the area of this team's expertise. And we've looked at a number of scenarios, and our remit and our client's remit is that the flood situation is no worse than that was there previously, and actually through our landscape enhancements actually improved the situation. Next slide. I'm going to hand over now to Matt at TouchTech.
Good evening, everyone. As mentioned, I'm Matt Thompson at TouchTech, and we represent the transport consultancy advisors on this proposal. Before jumping into the bullets on the screen, I think it's just worth mentioning that from the outset for this proposal, we've agreed with the local highway authority to firstly agree the basis for designing the transport and highway infrastructure on site, and also to agree the scope of the assessment of the highway and transport impacts. So moving on to the bullet points, the first bullet point's in relation to the site access. The proposed site access is a simple priority. It will also feature a right turn pocket going into the site. The provision of the right turn pocket will ensure that the existing traffic on Poyle-Dewey Road is not delayed by the development traffic. The site access has been designed using the Isle of Man Highway Design Guide, but it's also been designed to allow for bus movements. We have therefore applied the appropriate highway design guidance for buses. The access has been tested in terms of its capacity, and it has been found that it will have ample spare capacity in the future year of 2026. and the design has been agreed in principle with the local highway officer. The second bullet point relates to the spine road. The spine road running east to west, as shown on the previous slide, that has been designed to create a pedestrian and cycle friendly environment through ensuring self-enforcing low vehicle speeds, and it will also accommodate buses. The third bullet point then relates to the on-site layout. Tetra Tech have worked closely with BACA architects in the design of the street network within the development. The on-site layout will create a movement network for pedestrians and cyclists that secures a safe, desirable, healthy, inclusive place to live through the provision of accessible streets and open spaces. The on-site layout also provides pedestrian connections to the public right-of-way to the south of the site. On-site car parking and cycle parking is proposed in line with the Isle of Man parking standards. Then in terms of access for on foot, by bicycle and by public transport, the site is located in a highly accessible location within a short walk distance of town, typically around 10 minutes to the center of town, where there's a wide range of community facilities and amenities. There's also the residential areas around the site, which have the opportunity to provide a workforce for the commercial aspect of the proposal. And the work is made to travel by foot or by bicycle in the future. And then finally, in terms of the traffic impacts, we've agreed to study area with the local highway officer, and we have assessed 6 off-site junctions in the AM and PMP hours for the future years of 2026 and 2031, and have found that with the proposed development, these junctions are expected to operate with some spare capacity in the future year of 2026 and 2031. If you have any questions in relation to the transport and highways impacts, then please put them into the question and answer box and we will pick them up at the end. Thank you.
So JBA aren't able to join us from Ecology this evening, so I'll contribute on their behalf. So there's been a number of surveys that have been undertaken in respect to sort of ecology. So they've mapped the habitats, so that's the invertebrates, birds, reptiles, trees. They had a good look through the nature reserve. They've mapped the grassland, bracken, bramble, and gorse, and others. And that has been consolidated what's called a preliminary ecological appraisal report. Now that was submitted to us about 3 or 4 months ago. And in that report, in terms of species identified, they identified that there was a presence of bats on the site. On the dates that they were there, which was August, they've identified in a single night 88 passes of up to 6 species. So it's not a huge amount, but within their advice was to maintain the trees as best we could, to keep the development at a safe distance from nature reserve, and if any trees were to be removed, to do soft fells. So all of those recommendations would be incorporated into the planning conditions. And then equally, depending on how we did the landscape for the individual dwellings, there's opportunities within the garden spaces and within the buildings themselves to enhance the opportunity for ecology. So based on the advice of Matt Manx Bat Group, they've advised that we do bat boxes 1 per 20 dwellings. So I can just see. Let me just check the stats on that. No, that's correct in terms of what they've established within the report. And then regarding trees, they've been mapped through site survey, and then also with the arboriculturalist on the site. They've been graded from A, which is high quality, B, moderate, C, low quality. Some ash dieback has been identified. So within the drawings that we produce, that will go in with our planning application, those will be indicated. And working with the arboriculturalists, we have developed a layout which avoids, I would say, the majority of the category A trees. There is some loss of the moderate and low quality trees. That's mainly in the area south of the intended spine road. And what we've set the team is that they are in the areas where we'll be planting along the spine road, we'll be actually adding new trees. And we're aiming for a like for like in terms of canopy cover. So that will mean that what is replaced will match what was there previously. Next slide. This is over to David.
Hello, everyone. I'm David Ramsbottom from HR Wallingford, and we used to be the Government Research Centre for hydraulics and floods and that kind of thing before we were privatised. And we're advising this project on flood risk. We're also working with consultant JBA, and I'll explain why in just a moment. But essentially, the site has been identified for development, but part of it does lie within the tidal floodplain, as you can see from the maps on the internet, which show the tidal floodplain in Ramsey. Also, there is some risk of fluvial flooding in the northern part of the site when high river flows combine with high tides. So there is a flood risk in part of the development site. You'll see there reference to the LIFE project that Richard referred to, and that was a research project where we looked at the whole question of how you manage sites like this and how you develop solutions that do not increase flood risk and wherever possible actually reduce flood risk. And the intention being that we can develop these types of sites in a way that works from a flooding point of view, and that we can demonstrate that there will be no increase in flood risk. Next slide, please. We worked with JBA because they're a consultant who've got a lot of experience on the Isle of Man. They've worked on the original flood maps that you see on the internet for the Isle of Man, and they also have access to the latest models that are being used for flood modelling in the Isle of Man. So the big advantage to us was, first of all, they had access to the models. Secondly, they were familiar with the situation in the Isle of Man. And thirdly, they had access to available data. And what we've been doing is they have been running models to try to come up with landscape solutions that demonstrate that under extreme flooding conditions, there is no worsening of flood risk. And that's been achieved by essentially working with the architects and the other members of the team to not only create a development, but also create a landscape features that allow water to flow across the floodplain more easily, thereby reducing flood levels. So we've looked at running the model with existing conditions, both for large tidal floods and for large river floods. And then we've looked at the same floods, but with developments in place. We've looked at both present day floods and also floods with a climate change scenario, again, both from the tidal and from the river flooding point of view. So what we've tried to do here is to ensure that the development is future-proofed. And in terms of flood mitigation, some of the properties are designed so that they can be in flood risk areas, and these are to the northern part of the site, and other properties lie behind the spine road that's been talked about. So what we've tried to do is to come up with detailed flood modelling, which will be explained in a flood risk assessment, and to make sure that, first of all, we understand what the flood risks are, and then we can demonstrate that the flooding will not be any worse. And as a result, in fact, the road just to the east, the Poyle Dewey Road, has a slight reduction in flood levels during extreme floods. Next slide, please. And now I hand over to
John from Fabric.
Thank
there.
you.
Hi everybody. This is John from Fabric. We're the landscape architects on the scheme, and the flood modelling has been key for our landscape design. and formulating this landscape master plan. This slide here shows actually how there's been a variety of features integrated into the landscape to help with water movement and permeability and retention, and also circulation of that too. In particular, there's a green network that provides the interface actually between the development and the nature reserve to the north. What we've tried to do within there actually is use sort of native vegetation, native trees to grade down from the nature reserve down to sort of wildflower planting and sort of amenity grass, rough grass around it. That will create this sort of graded edge, which will help in terms of benefits of ecology, creating movement corridors in there for species, and also trying to create this continuous corridors of trees throughout the site, which is key for birds and bats that use those movement corridors. As mentioned before, when there's been trees that have been removed, we've tried to then select and put in trees that will be able to attain a similar canopy, and if not bigger over time. So with the large area green space, that has allowed us to plant quite tall and big forest scale trees, which sort of help with sort of visual aspects, softening, but also in terms of carbon storage as well. Larger trees help and store better carbon. Through a scheme as well, we've looked at materiality. So in terms of sort of driveways, we've looked at using permeable sort of parking areas, permeable blocks, and creating almost muse-like streets and cul-de-sacs that are defined by sort of block paving. Throughout the green network as well, we've incorporated play that's been mentioned earlier. They're sort of throughout the site quite well connected to development, and they offer sort of different play experiences in each one. So the NEAP would be for maybe older children, whereas the LEAP at number 2 would be for children just learning to play by themselves and get out from the house. And then LAPs are sort of areas that really young children can sort of call their own, and they're made up of sort of stepping stones, informal play apparatus that provide and create sort of imaginative experiences through there. Also along the boundary to the south, we've looked at retention of the lot of trees along there, but also strengthening through additional tree planting. If you go to the next slide, please, Jack, thank you. So this sort of just explains, I guess, some of the points that I picked up before. Through the sort of spine road in particular as well, we've been made space for tree planting along there to create a green corridor through there for cars, but also for the cycle route that runs through there too. And along that route as well, we're looking at incorporating rain gardens, a planted swale almost that holds and through the plants themselves soak up the water. There's also sort of formalising the footpaths that already run to the desire lines almost created at the moment through the site to the nature reserve, formalising those paths and making them of a hard material so that people stick to those paths and don't create any additional pressure on the ground floor through trampling and creating desire lines through those to the nature reserve. Go on to the next slide, please. So this slide here just shows some of the, I guess, present images of the various aspects of the development. In particular, the spine road, the trees, making sure that they have a good canopy and are of species, quite rich, different species that can be planted along there. And also the rain gardens as well that form a sort of a green spine along that street. And the neighbourhood green, which was located to the south of the development along the disused path, that creates almost like a gateway space to the site, and also green for the houses that are fronting that. Go on to the next slide, please. So this is just a visual of what we intend some of the play spaces maybe to look like through development. This is of the Leap, looking at using sort of quite natural materials to make it fit within sort of the, I guess, the character of the area, and sort of drawing reference on some of the features of the site as well, and also making it planted and combining planting within the play areas as well to provide that sensory experience, but also to make it fit within the landscape. Go on to the next slide, please.
So that's back to me, John. So this is the emerging master plan. So this sort of is giving an indication of sort of the density and the distribution of the proposed employment, retail, just a small element in terms of the parade of shops, and then the residential, which will also support that development. Next slide. And these numbers on this plan indicate the proposed heights for the development. So the along the tramway, they're sort of semi-detached and detached dwellings at 2 stories plus a pitched roof. Along the main spine road, we mentioned that there were 2 stories in the middle with a slightly 3-story on the corners, which provide the gateways into the cul-de-sacs behind. Overlooking the park are the apartments. So they're 3 stories of residential with an undercroft of parking, and then the public house and the employment to the north of the development, both at sort of 2 stories in height. Next slide, please. And one of the things that came out of the discussion with the planning department was to provide a variety of mix in terms of the housing, in terms of size and scale, but also the articulation in terms of the facades. We took design cues from the rendered finishes within Ramsey and elsewhere on the island, looking at the window formations and the balconies, and also the suggestion that we should also introduce some bricks within this to sort of a bit of richness in terms of color and warmth. Next slide, please. And as we're all aware, in order for us to leave a positive legacy for our grandchildren, then climate change is at the forefront of most people's minds, and sustainability will start to creep into developments within the Isle of Man. And there's some new policies on the horizon. So whilst they're not there now, we've actually already anticipated those and integrated those within the design. So our approach is what we call a fabric first. So it's about keeping your building warm. That's through heat loss, but also through heat gain during the summer. So it's like wearing a big jumper, providing a lot of insulation, which means that the energy needs within the building can be kept to a minimum. Once you've established that as a baseline, then the energy that is required within those properties is topped up from renewable sources. So this can either be solar hot water or solar voltaic, which creates electricity. And then we've also been talking about the fuel crisis and gas. And in the next years or so, we'll be switching, I think, mainly across to ground source heat pumps. So they are pipes within the ground, which use a heat exchange, and through underfloor heating will actually give your housing a very nice warm ambient temperature, which then only needs a modest amount of energy to top it up, to bring it up to sort of 21, 22 degrees. So all of that can be integrated into a seamless piece of architecture, whereby it's a lovely place to live, but also underpinned by sustainability. Next slide, Jack, please. So these are just some of the examples of how they could be integrated into a development. And we should also mention that whilst electric charging is not ubiquitous on the island as yet, that all of the houses are going to be designed to integrate the infrastructure. So if we can't put them in immediately, that all the conduits and pipes, they're all there ready to receive the electric charging points. And we've also worked with Manx Utilities to provide 2 substations on the site, which also are sized to provide sufficient electricity to all the homes, but also electric charging points in the future. Next slide. So this is how the energy strategy would work, also integrated with the permeable paving and trees. So this is a very holistic plan. There's a lot of competing constraints on this site, and it's about finding the balance between all of those elements to create a wonderful place to live, which is underpinned by sustainability, and again, which is also safe in terms of flood risk. Next slide. So we're going to wrap up now by just showing you the visuals. These are the sort of the penultimate images before we sort of make a planning submission. But I think you can see from the photographs that it's quite a balanced intervention. It's a very green and lush development, and there's a lot of variety there in terms of the housing stock and placemaking. So next slide. So this is the entrance in off Paul Dewey Road before we just cropped in on the housing to the left. But this will be the landscaping feeding into the park areas, the swales, and the nature reserve beyond. Next slide. These are the apartments overlooking the main play space in the middle. And I think one of the commissioners did ask us where the kid's going to kick a ball around. So we've provided that within the heart of our development. Next slide. And again, these are just as you move through the development, there's just different shifts in scale. This is for younger children. So provision is there for that level of recreation. Next slide. This is within the sort of the cul-de-sac. So this was preserving some of the existing trees, which then links back into the tramway sort of public footpath. Next slide. And these are, these are typical streetscape. So we brought more trees in there, the hedgerows in between, different varieties in terms of the materiality of the surfaces. Again, all of this enriches the sense of place and creates a lovely neighborhood to live in. Next slide. And then these are, the images of the emerging public house and function rooms. This is at the sort of the edge of the development. Next slide. And I hope you can sort of see with these images, we're sort of giving a twist on the traditional public house, something a little bit Scandi in its design. But we're hoping that this becomes a real kind of community hub, creates jobs. And if you're just a passerby using the public trail, it's a lovely respite along the journey. Next slide. So we'll open up this now to questions to the floor. We've answered a couple whilst we've been going through, and perhaps I can go through those. But to date, I don't think how many questions have we got coming through, Jack?
So we have a few, but yeah, we were kind of answering them as we went along. So,
well, just so for the benefit of everybody. So the first question was, do we need another development in the Isle of Man on a greenfield site? So we answered that by saying that this is a site, an urban site that's been allocated for development. It is close to the city centre, so there are sustainable transport links and walkable distances for people within the town. And it's our view that it's better to sort of develop here and responsibly than on the peripheries of settlement boundaries, where you then it's urban sprawl out into the countryside. So in this case, it's about developing close to and within the heart of Ramsey. We had a question here about the road layout and whether that's able to accommodate refuse wagons. So the response from the team was that Tetra Tech, as part of their remit, will do what's called sweep paths. So they look at every road junction, they look at the volume of traffic, they look at speeds. So if you notice that the main spine road is actually kinked, and that's designed so it's a sort of a self-regulating, to self-regulate speed along that journey rather than having speed humps. And it's been tested for emergency vehicles and for refuge. So that's all compliant with highways. And I believe Matt's been liaising with the Department of Transport on the island, who've been running checks as we've been evolving this. Darren kindly asked what change in sea level has been included in the climate change models. So we're working on a value of about 0.8 of a meter, which is 2.6 feet. And with much of the modeling, we are looking to sort of extreme conditions. Now, these are events which may happen, but they're likely to happen once in a century. So they're not going to happen very often, but we want to have the comfort that the development, if it's tested to those scenarios, is able to cope, and the team and the testing is indicated that it will meet those challenges. Is anybody else? We have 13 attendees. So thank you very much for joining us. We do appreciate you taking your time this evening to listen to the teams. Are there any plans to minimise the impact of construction on residents of the existing homes that will take place on the other side of my fence? Yes. So one of the things which we're considering within this design, or one of the things which we normally put together in any application, is called a construction management plan. And within that, we would then set out where the site compound would be. And that would be developed with the local authority. There would be some very clear instructions on when construction could start. So construction would not start before 8 in the morning and would be finished by, I think it's somewhere between 5 and 6. We normally, if possible, get our contractors to sign up to what's called a considerate contractors sort of charter, which means that they won't be swearing, will be very well behaved on site. And in terms of waste and management, we're very keen as well that as much of the properties will be prefabricated, so many of them will have timber frame, so that we can accelerate the construction process. So I think the first stage for us is to get a scheme which is well balanced in terms of, I say, all of the constraints on the site. When we move beyond that phase and we start to move towards construction, then I think we'll do another round of consultation to ensure that the contractors' plans and those of the developers and are dovetail with the local populace, to make sure that any construction is minimized, because we are aware that there will be an impact. Are there any other questions? And just go on, sorry.
There was a question regarding the recording of this meeting. So, and I'd just like to clarify that this meeting is being recorded. So once it has finished, then I'll be able to upload the video and make it public, so people can watch it at their leisure.
The other thing to add as well is there is an opportunity to ask further questions via the website. So if there's anything that comes to mind tomorrow, you're more than welcome to send on those comments. And as part of the planning application, there'll be a submission which is called public consultation, and that will list out all of the questions that have been put to the team to date. And where best we can, we'll provide a response to those, and then those questions will be publicly available on the planning portal when the submission goes live.
I can see 2 more questions. One by Mark Stephen, which is, it says, I might have missed it, but do you have a rough idea of timelines for start and completion of construction? And the second question is from David, which asks, how will the important assemblage of birds at high tide on the salt marsh be protected from disturbance by walkers and dogs? The proposed footpaths and pub would likely increase current levels of disturbance to these protected bird species. I do believe the ecological professional party isn't with us, and Richard, you may be able to do your best to answer that now, but we can also follow that up with a more detailed answer. I think in terms of the first question, which is around start and completion of construction, we really are based on the sort of planning process, which takes some time, and we have to move through that process before we can consider the timelines. We wouldn't want to sort of make any false promises or things that may be incorrect at this stage. So we are at the hands of the planners through this phase. But if you have any answer on the ecology aspect, Richard.
So I think just adding to the point there, just Joshua, is that just to give people comfort that the first priority of this development, subject to planning, is to build the spine road. And the hybrid application is it's circa 75 dwellings plus all the play space and the spine road. So that would be phase one. The outline would follow at a later date. In terms of the birds and high tide, I'm afraid I'm not going to be able to answer that now, but I can give you the assurances that we do have JBA who are based on the island. The design as it is not the final design. So if when they review the footpaths, if we do believe that they will be an encroachment into those habitat areas, we'll be more than happy to make adjustments or even take those out. In all of these discussions is the balance. We have the planning department asking us to open up the walkway, and on the other hand we have ecologists that say please just don't touch these areas. It's about finding that balance. So we'll work with departments, and if there's any other information which could help guide these designs, please do send those through. Okay. So and then just a very quick, just in terms of just corrections, I have noticed that in terms of the press, that the development has been attributed to SulbyRiverside development. It's just so everybody's clear, it's Blythe Church Holdings who are the team behind this. Just in case there's any confusion about who's behind the development. And then just finally wrapping up, I mean, hopefully you can see that the team have made great endeavours to create a very balanced scheme. It's underpinned by, say, the research that we did for the British government, which has been recognised globally and implemented in Holland as a responsible way to develop riverside sites and to provide, great value homes in terms of quality of space standards, safety, and beauty. Ultimately, we want to create wonderful places for people to live. So if there aren't any further questions, we'll thank everybody for your...
You have another question. We have a question from Darren just asking, Ramsey and the Isle of Man need more affordable housing. What price ranges are you expecting these properties to be sold at? From an affordable housing point of view, we're in constant communication with the planning team, and various aspects come into it, such as the building of the spine road and the infrastructure that this site brings. But there will be affordable housing elements, and we're in discussions with them on that now. In terms of the price ranges of the properties, we're not able to release that, but we look to be competitive. And I think something that we hope you see in the CGIs that are shown is that we are trying to bring a quality product to the market here. We're not just trying to bring sort of box units of residential. It is trying to make them very aesthetically pleasing and good quality. So Richard, if you have anything else on that.
No, I think it's also, it's to do with the build quality as well. You can roll out cheap, affordable housing, and that's not what we're trying to do here. This is a legacy project, and I think the first phase of the build will hopefully demonstrate that and your commitment and Joshua and the rest of the team to this project. Yes, so on that basis, I think it's going to provide something quite beautiful in this part of Ramsey.
Yeah, that's perfect. I do believe that's all the questions I can currently see, unless there's any finals. But I do believe that's everything.
And then just to give people, in terms of the time frame now, we'll spend December collating and going through the reports back from the team. We'll be making adjustments to the design based on that expert feedback. We're in constant dialogue with the planning department. The website is providing some wonderful feedback. I think we've had about 50 to 100 responses from the website. And then once that has settled and that has informed the design, we intend to make a planning submission early in the new year. So thank you everybody for joining us this evening. And If we don't speak to everybody before, enjoy your Christmas period, and we'll look forward to catching up with everybody in the new year. Thank you again.
Thanks, Richard. Thank you very much, everyone.